And we were asked back on a Friday night, in the middle of the set. So we instantly moved from a kind of beginner slot to a more intermediary slot. And we kind of just kept moving on from there pretty fast. So we got out of town, and it took us about a year to get out of town from like the first rehearsals and recordings to going on tour and that kind of thing. About a year. '87, Come On Pilgrim. This was the first thing that we released.
An enjoyable record to make?
Yeah, it was in a warehouse, and we were told not to go out after dark, and they clamped down and locked the warehouse to protect whoever was inside of it. And we brought our sleeping bags, and we camped out there for about 3 days and made our first record. It
took a while for the record to kind of get paced, didn't it, that particular album? Did you feel that you were doing something important straight away? You were just that the audience was there waiting for you. You just had to reach them.
I don't know. I mean, we were all pretty happy. I mean, I quit. I gave notice at my job at another warehouse. The first time I saw the artwork for the first disc, which would have only been available on import there in the United States. This is in the fall of 1987. So as soon as I got the proof or whatever of the artwork, I gave my notice that day. That was good enough for me. And we hit the road and played to probably small crowds for a few months. And then shortly thereafter made a record, and we were going to England and Holland and Germany, whatever. So as far as we were concerned, it was all pretty rosy. I don't know that it really was, but you understand, I wasn't working at the warehouse and I was on my way to Europe, so good enough for me. I mean, you know what I mean? And I haven't really looked back since.
In 1989, you worked on Doolittle with Gil Norton for the first time. How did that relationship work? Because you worked with him at various points.
I don't know that we had any kind of method. He maybe had some methods because he was an experienced producer and we were an inexperienced band. So we were rough on the edges, and he was a pop producer, a British pop producer. And that's different than an American pop producer, I would say, in general. And so that was a good match because it kind of spiffed us up a little bit for people that had more pop ears. But because we were pretty rough, it still had a kind of naivete. It still had a roughness that sort of the fans of that sort of thing, it still had enough of that we held on to them from our previous two releases. So that was it kind of climaxed or came together. It's synchronicity, I guess is what happened. To date, that is our most successful record. It's definitely the most successful record in my entire catalog.
You're listening to Do You Remember the First Time with me, Matt Everett, and my guest, Black Francis. Welcome back.
Thank you.
It was during the making of Trop Le Monde in 1991 that you apparently started considering the idea of making your first solo album. Is that right?
It sounds about right, yeah.
Sounds about right. What were your reasons for embarking on a solo career for the first time?
Just ego and kind of boredom and, tired of feeling sick to your stomach because of all the tension in the room or whatever, or on the bus, So it's a natural enough progression, Every band gets 5 years, and after that, things start to kind of fall apart. And, usually it's the singer who decides, hey, I can go do my own record. Actually, I don't need you guys, and that's what you do.
First record, your first solo record, Frank Black in 1992. Was it difficult to step out the shadows of of the Pixies? Pixies cast a big shadow. Did you feel nervous about doing it on your own?
Not particularly. You have you have one kind of crucial, humbling experience coming from a lofty place to a more, crappy place.
What was yours?
Playing at I was in a beach town called Grover Beach, which is just south of Pismo Beach, which is just south of San Luis Obispo, which is just south of San Francisco. And I believe they serve seafood at the venue or Italian food or something. And, plywood stage, and then the waitress kind of yelling at you to be quiet because people are still eating, you know what I mean? And then you realize, oh, okay, this is where I am. This is where I am in my life. This is reality. And then, it hurts for a second, but then it's kind of, it's kind of charming at the same time because you're in a beautiful little obscure place that you would never be if you were in a big band. And so, I didn't pay my dues, so to speak, the first time around. So it became time to pay my dues. And I did.
Lots of your songs around that time were there was this science fiction theme. We talked a bit about themes before. Do you remember seeing your first UFO?
Yeah. I was about aged 6, I think. 5, 6. No, maybe I'm 6, I would say. 6 or 7 even. And it was a long cylindrical rocket shape kind of thing, missile shaped. It was in broad daylight, and it was my brother and I were playing in the mud, and we stopped what we were doing, and we looked up, and there was this object not so high above the ground, probably could be measured in hundreds of feet, probably, as opposed to thousands of feet. And it was completely silent, without markings. It didn't have wings or anything like that, So it was a totally classic pencil-shaped cigar. It wasn't cigar-shaped, it was missile-shaped. And it moved very slowly, like a bird would fly, not like it was a silent, slowly moving silver object moving slowly over us, over the house, over the yard, and it moved on down the road. And then we went back to playing in the mud, and that was the first time I saw something.
Teenager of the Year, which was a solo record that came out in 1994. I was I suppose, the first big kind of hit you had as a kind of solo artist, I suppose. I mean, it's a lot of songs on that record. You said you found it quite easy to be prolific early on. Has that kind of kept up with you? Have you always kind of felt the need to write a lot? As it's been like an ongoing process that happens all the time? Because some people find it quite hard to write that many songs in one go.
I find it quite important or necessary to continue to be a rock musician guy. I think that's really my motivation, as opposed to I need to get something out of me. I have this song and it must be heard. I must sing it from the rooftops. It doesn't really feel like that to me. I know it does feel like that to other people, but to me it strictly comes down to being in a band or being like Donovan. You know what I mean? To be that, whatever you want to call that. Troubadour is a nice word that we've borrowed from history. It's sort of a misnomer when you hear about troubadours, I suppose, and what their experience was like. It was different, but I suppose it's the same thing. I don't know. You traveling around and playing songs, I guess just troubadours seem to probably had a lot more rules. So it's just that that doesn't exist anymore. So some of us call ourselves troubadours. I mean, I like that notion. I like reading about the troubadours.
That's an interesting work ethic, as you say. There is this kind of division between the slightly more sort of pretentious way of approaching songwriting and this, as you say, a slightly more direct ethic. Where do you think you get that from? Is that your kind of parents or your own sort of background? What?
I don't know. Like I said, if you have a pivotal moment where you see a blue sparkly drum set and, you decide, it's self-identification, and whether it's just something that you told yourself when you were a little kid and it eventually became true, or whether it is sort of tapping into something that's bigger than you. I don't know which it is, but that's how it feels to me. It's, when did you decide you want to become a musician? I mean, I've been asked that many times over the years, and the more I've been asked it, the more I answer it, and the more I think about it, the more I realize, well, I didn't decide necessarily. It's sort of, unless you want to talk about some sort of moment when I was very young, I mean, I don't certainly think that my children can make decisions. You know what I mean? I tend to have an adult view often, when they're trying to decide on something, they can't make a choice. They're just kids. They can't figure that out. I've got to figure that out for them, But having said that, also they say that a child is sort of who he is by the time he's age 5, in terms of their psychology, their personality, their makeup. It's all whatever happens before you're 5. That's the input, and then the rest is the output. So somewhere along the line, there was an identification, self identity. So when did I want to become a musician and a songwriter and a singer? I have always been.